Hey guys, good morning. It's Tuesday, so you know it's another episode of NOMBERG LAW Live. I'm here in downtown Birmingham with my buddy Brett Turnbull. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
I'm glad you got a few minutes for me. If you guys know Brett, you know he's all over the place. So we tracked him down. We've got him here in his conference room today, and there's so many areas that we could talk about today with what Brett does professionally, and we'll get into a little bit of that. But today we're going to talk about trucking litigation. And there's just a lot of things that we can go in this direction. But Brett, tell us a little bit about yourself personally and professionally.
Yeah, I'm Brett Turnbull from here in Birmingham. Have 4 kids. Been married for almost 14 years now. Starting next month. I did remember that, Dawn. So if you see this,
and she will.
She will. That's right. No doubt about it. Started a firm about 5 months ago, which is exciting, and we have offices in Birmingham and in Atlanta, and frankly have a practice that I feel like is pretty nationwide. But obviously, Birmingham is home, Alabama's home, Atlanta's only a couple hours away. We do, as a firm, we practice in a really wide range of different areas that pertain pretty much all personal injury, though. And so, if it's personal injury, then we pretty much handle it. Anything from car wrecks all the way to obviously product liability, medical malpractice, trucking, all the different areas that we can possibly get our hands on. Some toxic torts, just a wide variety.
Well, Brett, I know that you've been practicing for more than a decade. I know you've got experience all over the country, and that you handle, whether it's these multi-district litigation cases where there's hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who've been injured, but you also handle single event cases. And that's what we're talking about here today. There never seems to be anything good that comes out of one of these cases when big truck meets little car. And I really want to focus not so much about the rules of the road. That's for another day. But I want to talk about really where you get involved in a case and how you help your clients. And not necessarily about the big wins, because there are some, and I applaud your team's efforts for what you've done. But when is it that you usually get into these cases, and how is it that you start to help your new clients?
When it comes to trucking, and there are some exceptions to this rule, but the rule is in trucking cases, when it involves an 18-wheeler, I hate to say it because some people look at it negatively when I say this, but the truth of the matter is immediately. And the reason is because obviously, as with any case, but especially when it involves an MBA with a big rig, you're in a situation where their company is going to send an investigator out to the scene, oftentimes to take photographs, to get police statements, to do various things. And frankly, most of the time they're doing things the way they should be done. But sometimes they're doing things to get out in front of it because they know they're going to end up in a case, because they know that they've hurt someone or killed someone. And so while they're out there doing these things, and you're the person who's been hurt or your family is grieving after having a death, you're behind the 8 ball already. And so they're not, again, it's not every single type of case that I say this, but if you've been involved in a trucking accident, with a big rig or frankly any type of commercial vehicle, they are circling the wagons, and you need to too.
It's whether it's a work comp case that I predominantly handle, or a big case like a trucking case where there's potentially catastrophic injuries, deaths, and to multiple family members or friends. I always tell my clients, one of the things that a lawyer can do best for you is to take away some of the stress. And that stress being, what am I going to do next? How do I handle whatever I need to be doing? And what's my priority? Well, your priority typically is going to be dealing with your family, dealing with your friends. And as the lawyer, you're not as emotionally involved in that particular case, particularly if it's people you don't know. You've just hired them, or they've just hired you.
Sure.
What is your approach to being able to communicate with these people who really are just in one of the most stressful times of their life?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, initially, it's a little bit tricky because folks are going through a terrible thing. A lot of times they're going through the worst thing they've ever been through, or they're physically or mentally incapable of handling their own affairs. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and it has to be handled, obviously, with a lot of empathy, understanding that folks, this is the first time they've been through it as well, which I realize most of the cases that we work on,
Absolutely.
that you and I both work on, that's the circumstance. And the thing that I have to sort of explain it is nice, sort of a ginger way as possible, is that not only are they out circling the wagons, but there's evidence potentially that's going away, not always destroyed, sometimes destroyed. Sometimes it's just evidence, whether it's roadway marks that would be very valuable to determining who was at fault in the crash, that an accident reconstructionist would use, whether it's information like trucking logs, which there's a certain amount of time that they have to maintain their logs, which we'll probably talk about in more detail later. But essentially, they can have logs that they can legally get rid of, hypothetically, if you wait too long. And there's also preservation, which is a lot of what and I know you know well, we send out what's called a letter of preservation to everyone involved for them to be legally obligated to preserve various things, including the truck that was involved in the crash. And the reason that's so important is these trucks have computers in them. And if they go out and drive these trucks, sometimes the truck isn't particularly damaged. It's just the car that's mangled, or the 18-wheeler is oftentimes, or maybe it's the trailer and they can just take the tractor off the trailer, and then they go drive these things for the next 2-3 weeks, and all of a sudden all the data that was in that computer that would have proven our case is gone.
It's in our world, in the lawyer world, we have access to statistics and other data that maybe the average person out there doesn't realize or doesn't know, particularly if you handle these kind of cases. And what the average driver may or may not know is the pressure that these drivers are under to meet their deadlines, that they may be sleep deprived, or they may have other health concerns. And just because you're seeing one of those big 18-wheelers, or maybe it's a tandem, what makes it even doubly in length. Brett, what is your experience in these cases that you've handled, the people you've deposed and interviewed, about what the average driver is like behind that wheel?
There are a lot of great truck drivers out there who take great pride in what they do. They're a necessary function in our country for our commerce and to move goods and products. There's no question about that. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that all of them are, evil or bad, because that isn't true. However, they are under a lot of pressure in certain ways. And nowadays they have GPS where they can watch every move they make. There are legal guidelines, regulations, federal regulations made by the U.S. government that govern how much they can drive, how much rest they need, all those different things. And the truth of the matter is that just like any other profession and just like anything else, the rules are broken. Sometimes it's just the way it is. The epidemic issue that I see is that they've created all these rules. And so, as with any human being, I guess in certain ways, people find workarounds. So let me give you an example. When it comes to how long they have to sleep, they just put off duty. We don't know if they're up all night watching movies. We don't know if they're up doing things they shouldn't be doing. I'd like to believe that my pilot on the next flight that I take is going to be well rested, but look, we know that also happens at times. And the greatest thing that has happened in the last, I'd say 5 to 6 years is there's a shortage of truck drivers.
Is that right?
And what I found in my experience, having worked on a lot of trucking cases in the last 5 or 6 years, is that the credentials of these truck drivers as a whole has declined. And I think that the trucking companies, if you really had a candid conversation with them, they would agree about that they have a hard time finding folks.
They're scrambling for qualified drivers.
That's it. They call it the Butts and Trucks program. And I'm not kidding. I didn't make that up. It's not that I'm trying to use a funny word.
Sure.
They literally call it, we got to put butts in trucks. And with that, it waters down the quality, waters down the training, it waters down the safety. The other epidemic issue that has hit the trucking industry, epidemic problem, is that just like my 4 kids who spend a lot of time on devices and are constantly engaged, is distraction. And when I tell you distraction, I will tell you that in the last year, I've had 3 different cases where truck drivers were watching movies on iPads or iPhones driving down the interstate. Just ran into stop traffic and plowed people. Now, is everybody doing that? No. But a lot of them are texting, just like every other, unfortunately, the epidemic issue. That epidemic exists in the trucking industry in a way that I have never seen. And these people are bored. They're in the truck for hours and hours and hours. And it's like, what do I do now?
I've spoken to several schools over the last few years about the dangers of distracted driving. And it doesn't just apply to teenagers at all.
No.
It certainly is not limited to young or new drivers. It's adults. It's anybody driving on the road who takes their eyes and their mind off of what they're doing. Guys, if you're just joining us, I'm in downtown Birmingham with my buddy attorney Brett Turnbull. Brett and I are discussing trucking litigation. I want to say hi to Steve and to Tom Willingham, who just joined us. If y'all have questions or comments you want to make, throw it into the comments section. So we'll let everybody know that you're there and participating with us. We always appreciate anybody who wants to communicate with us, whether you have a case of your own or questions that you may have about trucking litigation. Brett, I want to kind of pivot just a little bit. When someone gets injured or there's a death in the case and your firm has been involved and you and your team go and investigate the case, typically, what's your experience about where these cases go from there?
So I could use a contextual example from a case we just got in yesterday, and it involves a truck wreck in Cleveland County, Alabama, and unfortunately, it resulted in someone losing their life. And so we obviously meet with the family, we get things rolling, in the sense that we send out the investigators, we send out the letters of preservation, we send out any FOIA requests or Freedom of Information Act requests. These trucks and their companies have a lot of, they all have Department of Transportation numbers. So there's a tremendous amount of information that they have an obligation to report to the government that you can get your hands on to learn things early. Frankly, my practice is to immediately file a lawsuit, and my reason is because I want to, number one, confirm that everything's going to be preserved, but number two, I want to take the deposition, I want to take the sworn testimony of the driver of the truck as soon as humanly possible. And there are a few different reasons for that. One is that the driver has better memory of what occurred leading up to the crash. Number two, to be completely, upfront, I also like for them to sort of get committed to what their story is before things come in and all of a sudden, now let's see if we can kind of bend this or bend that to kind of conform to what the truck computer says, or to what various things may come up in the case, what my cell phone records say that I might not be quite so forthcoming about on the front end.
Well, there's a big difference in somebody testifying, say, 6 months after an accident,
Correct,
or versus 3 years after an accident, because memories fade, memories change.
That's right.
There's tons of studies out there that talk about what people remember, how they remember it is based on their emotions at the time, what they've gone through from the time of the event up until the time that they end up testifying. You're exactly right, and I think that's a very smart move, and I know that your clients appreciate the quicker you can get answers for them, because most of them are not specifically looking for money. That's not what every case is about. A lot of people want to know why. They want to know answers, and you may or may not be able to get to that during the course of your representation.
And sometimes it's just an accident, like it would be if it were any other wreck on the road. What I find is that the majority of the time, there's something that leads to that path, whether it be, as you mentioned, sleep deprivation, distraction, frankly, incompetence. Last year I had a case where a person had been involved in 6 other accidents and they hired him anyway.
Wow.
Those kind of things where someone is just, for one reason or another, is not cut out to be a truck driver, right? I mean, we see it in our profession. It's just the way that life works. Every profession has it. And anyway, there's a lot of different possible scenarios as to kind of how you end up in the place you end up. But I'm just seeing more and more circumstances where traffic stopped and people just get blasted, or or trucks or move over on people and just run them slap off the road, or whatever the case may be. There's just a lot of different reasons for it.
Yeah, and as we touched on a little while ago, even though the Department of Transportation has its guidelines that you're not supposed to go beyond a certain number of hours driving versus off work and those kind of things, there's still a lot of pressure because there's a lot of money involved. So I'm sure that dispatch or back at the headquarters, they're telling these drivers, you've got to be at so-and-so place by a certain time. So it kind of creates a domino effect in some of the mindset of the drivers of being probably more aggressive than they really should be. And as a result, things like this happen. Brett, what is your experience in that when you finally get to depose that trucking driver, the person who caused or was involved in the accident, what type of personality are you seeing?
I would say as a whole, and again, just, this is not a diatribe against anyone or for anyone. We all have people in our professions, for your profession, our profession,
Sure.
who don't do things as well as we would like them to do it. What I find that's a little bit concerning, and over time it's become a pretty, it's prevalent, it's a proven thing, is I feel like there is a very circle the wagons, very sort of a us against you kind of mentality. And so things like, as an example, whether the driver should be fired or not, the driver that I was mentioning that was watching a movie right down the road, and I'll listen to get that, they kept him on because they basically stuck their head in the sand. They didn't want to know, right? Now the police obviously would have been very interested to find that out, but they didn't pull the necessary information,
Right.
In that particular case. And again, I'm not criticizing the police. I'm just that's just the facts.
It is what
it is. And so by the time we got all that information and took it to the corporate representative, the company man, and put it all in front of him, and the last question, this is toward the end of the case,
Right.
once all the evidence had been gathered, and I said, look, this fella's still driving for you today. Are you going to walk out these doors now that you have all this information and do the right thing and keep him off the roads and keep our roads safe? And he said, well, we'll consider it. And so what I would say is this: I think they knew there's no other explanation for him to have blasted those people.
Right.
And using it in
Right.
context, to me, the way I feel a lot of times in these cases, it's kind of like we're going to protect we're not going to just come clean and be honest and say this man did something that our company doesn't approve of. It's more like, how can we get out of this?
It's damage control.
It is. That's generally speaking, and I realize that the response to that from the trucking industry might be, well, there's a lot of lawyers out there who file cases that shouldn't be filed.
Right.
And they may be right, but that's just my experience in cases that I obviously felt like were righteous cases or only brought them, and where I felt like the truck driver and the trucking company were at fault for the crash.
Sure. And everybody who's been involved in these cases not from the lawyer standpoint, but when you've actually been involved, because I think the average driver has probably been in multiple fender benders or accidents throughout the course of their driving life. I dare say I don't know too many people who've never been involved either as a passenger or a driver in some type of a collision.
Sure, that's true.
Brett, as we get closer toward the end of our discussion, and I want you to leave our audience with some takeaways. And what I mean by that is, if you happen to be involved in one of these accidents, whether you're the driver or a passenger, whether you caused it or were the victim of the accident, what are some things people should do if they have the presence of mind while they're still at the accident site?
Yeah, I mean, if it's one of the circumstances where you have the ability to not, be taken away in an ambulance and obviously get, taken away, and so you have the ability to sort of do things on your own. Just like if you were involved in an NBA, I mean, obviously, any witnesses who see the accident are an independent witness, meaning independent as in a person who doesn't have a stake in whose fault it was. Okay, so they're just some other driver who was on the road,
Just
or some other person
there
standing on the corner, whatever it might be. Those people that don't have a dog in the fight are obviously very valuable to gaining, to the story. I mean, and to telling, because what you might get is somebody might just slap run over you and they get out of the truck and say, wasn't me, it was them. Right. So then it's your word against theirs. And so any witnesses who are present, getting the names, the phone numbers, which the police oftentimes try to do, but they're not perfect either. I mean, sometimes, they get and the other thing I would say this is a new thing. I say it's new to the world of the whole, is how much of this United States of America is on some sort of surveillance tapes. Isn't that something? I mean, cameras are everywhere, whether it's gas stations, which obviously have them for different reasons. They're trying to figure out who's going to drive off with their, for free with gas.
But so often they'll capture other things that occur in the station's lot.
I've had bank cameras that turned out to be pivotal pieces of evidence, and a lot of times those companies, if they're not approached early, then those things get overwritten, and understandably so. And so you need to get out in front of that.
It reminds me, I don't mean to step on you, but we had a truck train collision case in Virginia several years ago, and the gas station across the street, their parking lot video camera captured the entire event, and that helped the parties figure out what happened better than any eyewitnesses or anybody who was involved in it. So you never know where the cameras may be.
It's something else. And one of the first things our investigators do is they go out and try to figure that out, because if it's anywhere, even rural places now, you can find.
You just never know.
You don't.
You never know. Look, you can be sitting in this is completely off topic, but you can be sitting in a football stadium like I was in this past January, Saturday in Tuscaloosa for the Ole Miss Alabama game. And there's a website, there's technology out there. They can find every particular person where they were sitting in high def. And I found myself and who I was with, and I didn't realize that was out there. That's some high tech stuff. So I'm sure
almost a little scary.
It really is. They put you at a place at a certain time. It sure does. But I'm sure the same technology we're referring to. Do 18-wheelers particularly have those types of technology on their trucks?
What's amazing, I have a case in St. Louis right now that is actually not a trucking case. It's actually a case that involves a brake failure on a car. But there was an 18-wheeler behind our car, and you see the brake lights on our car. So the 18-wheeler has a camera. You know who else has cameras? They're Uber and Lyft drivers oftentimes. Dash cam cameras, that actually look out front. I've even had cases where just normal NBA, just normal citizens who are driving around for no particular reason have these dash cam cameras. It's become prevalent. And if there's someone who's a witness to the crash, like in this particular case, we have 18-wheeler behind us, and they have it going out in front. So there's also a lot of technology now that tractor trailer drivers use for a lot of different reasons. I joke and say that new ones have technology that would be, rival an airplane in terms of figuring out what happened and how it happened. And there's 100, different potential downloads that can be done. And, older trucks obviously have less and less the further it goes back. But we're at an age now where there's a lot of information that can be ascertained. That's for sure.
Gosh, just having one of these makes you an investigator.
That's it.
If you're a witness, or if you're a third-party witness, or if you're a participant in a motor vehicle accident or one of these collisions, what are your thoughts about using the iPhone to either video or photograph or gather information?
Yeah.
If it's safe to do so.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is when you get out. Obviously they're going to send an investigator out. They don't deny it. There's no big secret. They send an investigator out who's on call, literally, usually an independent adjuster type of investigator, to go out and take photographs and to gather witness statements if possible, and to tell the driver things like don't admit fault.
Right.
Even to the police, you just tell them factually, comply with what the police ask you, but only talk about it in a factual manner. Usually there's an accident emergency kit in the glove compartment of the truck driver's truck that has a used to be throwaway cameras. I don't even know if they have those anymore. But so yes, obviously your phone and recordings, and obviously we even go get the body cams from the police officers. Now they most of the time have body cams,
right.
And sometimes they're the first people to pull up, and they have a dash cam on their car. So
you get to see what they say.
there's just so much that we go compile evidence-wise. And at the end of the day, it all kind of fits together like a puzzle. And typically we get to the truth.
Well, guys, hopefully you're never involved in one of these, because these are not enjoyable experiences whatsoever. They're usually can be catastrophic, tragic, or some of the worst experiences in a person's life. But if you do find yourself involved in one of those, you need to seek counsel of an experienced attorney like Brett here, who handles these types of cases. Brett, for folks who want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with your firm?
Our firm here is the Turnbull Law Firm, and it's Turnbull Law Firm, and it's turnbullfirm.com, 2 L's, and we're here in Birmingham. We're at 2 North 20th Street, so it's
And we'll put all your contact information in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Brett, I really appreciate your time and educating myself as well as people who may be watching this either now or later on. Guys, as always, thank you for stopping by for a few minutes and spending some time with me and today with Brett. I really appreciate you having some time and being in town.
That's it. I really appreciate you having me. Appreciate you having me.
Well, guys, that'll conclude us for today. Another episode of NOMBERG Law Live, as we do each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. We try to bring to you interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we will catch you another time. We will.
See you now. All right.